of May, isn't it? Wow,
Oh
time
my
flies
gosh. Wow.
sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it doesn't exist, but it appears to, and I think it goes perfectly into like what we're going to talk about today, calm versus
Yes,
chaos, and like I think just the
exactly. And I
concept
guess
of time.
just a position between something like that's calm, like time, or chaotic. And to me, I mean, we all have the same resources when it comes to how much time in a day, right? But how come some people get to achieve so much more in the same amount of time as you and I?
Mhm.
And that's the basis for my entire coaching program, because I have come to realize a few things, and you've come as well, Ashley, from different angles on how, of course, not all time is equal, which means that if we can get to a place where we can create a type of time that allows us to achieve so much, that we can be those people that we keep seeing outside of us that create so much with the same amount of resources as you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I guess I'll come to you, Ashley, first. What's your definition of calm versus chaos? Let's do that first, because of course everyone has their own definition of it.
Yeah. So when I hear calm versus chaos, it's really like the spirit versus ego, and like the simplicity of our innate state, which is that of spirit, versus the chaos and shiny objects of the ego that wants to keep us in this state of fear. So I think a misnomer for me with like the calm that I've had to unpack, which was probably just like another one of those societal conditioning or, stories, narratives that I held, that when I heard about like calm waters or, calm, and really like this tie it has to like spirit and spirituality and like healing, right? Like it's almost like,
Yeah.
oh, you're not healed unless you're calm. I envision like this person just sitting there in this state of meditation, or anybody I came in contact with that was just really like quiet and
Hmm.
reserved, which to me I was like, I don't think I can ever get to that state. And don't get me wrong, like I definitely like my chaos on the external at the level of form does appear less, but ultimately it's not about that. It's not about what it looks like at the level of form in the world. It's about what's going on internally. And I was having a conversation the other day. We think we have to like create all this time to be, right? Like that's the big thing. Let's become human beings instead of human doings. And I agree, let's become human beings instead of doings, but let's realize that the being is at the level of content, not at the level of form. So you could like, it could look like you were crazy busy doing a million things at the level of form, but truly at the level of content, you're just being, you're just allowing, you're really in that state of what people would call flow, which to me is that state of just like your truth. Um, yeah, so for me, I would say like anytime I feel internally chaotic, I know I've entered back into the ego belief system and I'm tackling fears and conflict between truth and that of the ego. But it's always an internal state, right? It doesn't have to do with the external um, at all. But sometimes it impacts the level of form. It looks different. And I think I want to hear your definition too,
Yeah.
Constantine, but I would love to unpack more as well that, like, I think that's another big piece is that people, their perception is what's driving it, right? You perceive someone who appears to get a million things done in their day as better than you. Um, but again, I take it back to it's not about what it looks like on the outside. It's how you feel internally, because that person could be like dying on the inside. They could feel like I've met people that are like, oh, this person's like
I've
super
been that person. I've been that person, so I know
yeah.
exactly what you mean.
Right. It's like, and now today, like in the past, Constantine, you got a crap ton done and people like could feel your chaos. But today you get a crap ton done and people are like, I want that, because they don't feel the chaos. Do they know that consciously? No, they know that subconsciously. But essentially, you might even be doing less than you used to do, because the things you are doing now are spirit-led and intentional, and they have more impact and movement, right? Like Jacob, I'm always referring to Jacob Collier. He's like, to him, it's not about reach, which means me like touching or impact, or not impacting, but like tons of people listening to his music. Instead, it's about impact. It's about movement. So even if he moves one person, that's more important to him than reaching 1 billion people. And that's what I feel is the difference. So yeah, I would love to hear you and love to know, like, are you really doing that much more, or is it just like your presence about it and the impact it actually has?
I love that last question. I'll start there really quick and then I'll define things as well from my point of view. I actually find myself I'm doing a lot less and achieving a lot more, if that even makes sense for people, right? But we'll explain why in a second. And with things like calm and chaos, success, and many other terms, everyone has their own definition of it. And usually the definition is based on someone else's stories, I have found, because that was me too. Like when I looked at success, let's say 3 years ago, it was based on the definitions my parents had for it, my caregivers, my teachers, my mentors. And I never really stopped to look at what success is for Konstantin. And I start with success because from there is how I started to look at, okay, so is all success equal? I mean, I had the American dream, amazing career, right? Family life, you know my story. Some people may not hear. Was I successful on the outside? Absolutely. Everyone was telling me how much they, quote unquote, envied my situation. Because they're like, wow, you have everything you want, right? Shiny toys, a family, the perfect career. What more do you want? And then on the inside, it was chaotic, right? On the inside, it wasn't what it appeared on the outside. Because I didn't find any joy, I didn't find any fulfillment, I didn't find any internal success because I wasn't clear on who I was. So there was this chaos. And to me, chaos is like you're from the ego, but at the same time, it's this place of uncertainty and no clarity, or lack of clarity, rather. Right? Because how did chaos look internally to me? Because I had no alignment, because I had no certainty or, let's say, clarity around who I am, everything seemed out of place because I was shooting in the dark and hoping I would hit a target that was always moving. So then now calm, on the other hand, is realizing that nothing is external of you, everything is internal. So if I'm looking for success, I don't look for it externally, I need to look for it internally. If I'm looking for beauty, or if I'm looking for companionship, it has to start within. So that's how, when I look at calm now, it's like, where can I bring calm in my life? Meaning, where can I bring clarity? Where can I bring gratitude? Where can I bring joy into my life? And the more calm I bring into my life, the easier things become. And I talk about something called calm time, or creating calm time, because I know offline we talked about this, and you mentioned it as well. It appears that some people have more time than others, and I was one of them. I seem to have more time than others, but my time was chaotic, meaning, again, all over the place, shooting in the dark, hoping to hit various things, and then, of course, it led to burnout, it led to many other negative aspects. So calm time to me is you create time that you can actually put to use based on who you are and how it serves you best. So in my case, if I create a few hours in my week, and I create many more than that, how am I using them? Well, I get to spend more time in meditation. I get to spend more time with my loved ones, including my dogs. I get to spend more time with friends, and so on and so forth. Or I get to build my business, which is another aspect of what I do, and other elements like this. So to bring it all together, what I would say from my life, actually, is that we all have definitions for all these terms that we're talking about. Find out what your definition is and see how much of it is based on your own story or someone else's story. And when I stopped to actually look at that, that's when I realized I was playing by someone else's rules. And that's why I could find only chaos and not a lot of calm. And the only calm I would find would be that elusive vacation you find for a few days. And then, of course, the chaos comes back in because now reality hits again. Right? So I've said a lot of things there, actually, but that's kind of where I stand with this. And the more I progress through my life, the more I look for calm. Because nowadays, yes, it appears I do a lot of things, but from my point of view, I'm doing a lot less, because those a lot of things are, I meditate a lot more than ever before. I do breath work. I do other type of mindfulness exercises. I spend time in nature. But all those things are part of the big picture. And even though you can say they're not part of my work routine, they absolutely are, because in those moments is when ideas come, when ideas get refined, when speeches get made, content gets created, even though I'm actually not physically actively doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of hit on it towards the end, and I think it kind of reminds me a lot of like when we talk about flow state, where like someone activated spirit and didn't understand what they were doing, so they gave it a different like hierarchical name and created a path. And when I hear like when you're taking those moments of intentionality of space, whatever that looks like, right? Like I do it on the Peloton. I mean, most people will be like, that is the most chaotic space ever. Like I've really been cultivating this this moment of just like sitting with Jesus and observing the big picture, observing the movie in those moments. And I think that like it doesn't matter what it looks like at the level form, but it's like the intention behind it. And then what's happening is you're getting inspired ideas. Which essentially inspiration is in spirit. But I think, yeah, like calm for me is the simplicity of just like, for me at least, not planning, not deciding I know what's best for me. We've done a lot of practices in my Lighthouse community around the I know mind and how it just like holds us back and how we really truly know nothing, especially when it comes to like what's best for us and what the big picture is, right? Anytime we make a decision about the future, we're actually using a past, right? We're using the past to create this vision of the future, and your past, got you to where you're at. Like it's not going to get you any further, but yet we think like it's so necessary to determine the future. So for me, when I'm truly at like my most serene, calmest place is when like spirit is guiding everything. And sometimes it seems completely crazy. The ideas, the guidance, it doesn't make any sense, but it feels so peaceful and calm and just like flow. I haven't used my to-do list in the last couple months because I've really been into allowing the guidance of spirit. So like when all of a sudden it comes in my mind of like, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that, Ashley, in the past I would write it down because I don't want to forget it. But I'm at the state of like, okay, is this in this moment right now? I have space, yes or no? Nope. Okay. It will come back if I'm meant to actually complete this task. So
I love that you mentioned that, because I used to be a massive list taker. I mean, I have a project management degree and certifications and all the beautiful stuff, right? It's all about lists. And like you, in the last year and a half, or year maybe, I haven't had any list. And it's, at times it's scary because like, what if I forget? And like to your point, it's like, no, you're not going to forget. If it's meant to be, like if it's something important, you will remember it. And that of course builds up your memory, whatever else you want to think about in terms of physiology. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that, Ashley. And as you were talking as well, I like to bring in some research as well. And I was curious to see like what research people have done around calm and chaos. And there were a couple that came up that seemed very interesting to me. So this is a series of like 112 researches that were done over a period of time, or studies, I should say, comparing actually households that have a chaotic environment and households that have more positivity and more calm. And they looked at the outcomes on children and parents. And of course, what they have found is most of them are very negative if it's a chaotic place. And it impacts, you can imagine, right? You're thinking, oh, okay, it impacts your well-being. But it's beyond that, right? What they found is that it impacts your cognitive, your social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes, right? And that makes sense, because if your environment is chaotic, it doesn't matter if it's a work environment, if it's a home environment, or anything in between, it makes sense that it would impact pretty much every aspect of your life and how you approach conversations, how you approach others because of the examples you had in life. So I'm curious, the reason I bring it up, Ashley, is because I know you talked about this, and I talk about it a lot, is calm starts within, right? But if you're in an environment that's fully chaotic, and let's say your family life is not great, or you're at a job that's not conducive to an environment that's calm, what do you do? Because yes, it starts within, but then your environment still has an impact on you. And in some cases, people cannot just leave home. They are stuck in the situation, or quote unquote stuck, in their minds at least, for a while longer.
Yeah. So I think that's very much a view of life is happening to you. First of all, like even the statement of your environment has an impact on you is literally saying that something outside of you can impact you, when in fact nothing can. It's all within. So I think, yeah, as children and stuff, that's, I mean, this goes into such like metaphysics and my like deeper belief system of like, this is all projection of the mind, and everything outside of you is a representation of what's going on with the mind. And the only way to actually heal it, to release it, to realize it's not happening, is to bring it back to the mind, right? So like when you're like, oh, my environment is chaotic, what is that really telling me? What is that really about? Bring it back in. Oh, okay, so this is the chaos in the mind. And, you know, it's really like this unpacking and unwinding there. But I think the biggest piece is that people, so there was a bunch of perspectives involved in that research project, right? Involved in like what is right or wrong, what is good or bad, what is chaotic, what is just not chaotic. And to me, anytime something can be one way or the other, then it was never either. So that means ultimately, like anytime, I know you love science, so like just take this with love from my heart. Science is just our ego really wanting to explain what's going on here, wanting to explain the ego. So anytime like we're reading research or anything like that, it's the ego analyzing the ego. So when I look at it from like a metaphysical point of view, or my, where I'm at, it's really hard for me to like, to not immediately be like, well, bring it back to the mind, right? Like life is not happening to you. It's not even happening for you. It just is. Like, it's just of you. It's a projection of the mind. It's like, it's this classroom, and the only decision here is purpose. And that purpose is the forgiveness and the remembrance.
But the reality is, actually, I mean, I love what you're saying, right? But the reality is most people are not at that level yet. So the way I see it is what I've been myself and what I am right now is that bridging of, I don't know, realities, worlds, whatever you want to call it, where you go from the ego to spirit. And science, at least, offers us an opportunity, in my opinion, offers us an opportunity to realize that spirituality or spirit is the path. And it's just proving certain things that we, you know, our ego wants us to prove. But as we see proof, we start to distance ourselves from the ego, hopefully, right? In many of us. Like I'm saying it for myself, I'm still getting pulled in a lot, but I still am able to distance myself. And by looking at this, like if you tell someone, hey, it's just in the mind, that you live in a chaotic environment, it's all you, I mean, they're going to shut the door on you pretty fast, I would imagine, right? And be like, she's crazy. I don't need to deal with that, right? It's someone else. It's not me. So my question is, if we are to inspire and empower people to get to the level you are, or beyond, right? To get to the level of understanding what's the ego, what's spirit, where do we start? Because I would imagine you don't just flip the switch and you go from one place to the next in a second, right? Like if you find yourself in a chaotic environment, how much of it is of your creation? I would imagine you'd argue all of it, right? Because it's for your greater good. But someone in the situation will probably not see it that way. So I'm wondering, how can we bring it down to be able to help someone that finds themselves in an environment? Because there's many people, especially as the world is going in the direction that it's going in, right? Where you have all these calamities and you have all this global warming stuff and you have all these wars and politics and all that stuff. Everything seems chaotic. Yet, when you pause and bring it in, and let's say you build a practice of mindfulness, a practice of meditation, which, by the way, research shows the huge difference there. So, for example, I'll throw this in because I love stats so much, Ashley. So meditation has been statistically shown to reduce cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, and improve resilience. Advanced practitioners, so if you have over 1,000 hours of meditation, have demonstrated significantly lower stress levels and quicker recovery from stressors compared to non-meditators. And the way I see it, if I look at meditation, my definition of meditation is coming within or going within yourself and just observing things and just reflecting and just being you. So it makes sense why chaos would start to leave your environment the more you practice this, because to your point, then the more you realize that it's all you in to begin with. It's no one else. Anyway, I said a lot of things there, but I'm curious to see your take.
Yeah. I think it's often a miss. No, it's like, so I just did a video about how we've been taught to surrender for an expected outcome, which is not surrender, right? Like if I meditate, meaning surrender, because meditation is a bunch of surrender, right? And just really trust and release, then my external will look different. Well, that's not truly surrender. So a lot of times it doesn't happen. Like, let's be honest. That's why people take manifestation courses all the time, and why, personal development and spirituality has become this like bazillion-dollar industry, because it never turns out at the level of form that you want it to always, right? So that's part of the problem too, is like making a direct correlation between the two, because that goes into your I know mind. That again is you believing that if my back hurts, it's because I feel unsupported, right? That's you making a correlation that you have no clue. You truly have no clue at the end of the day. But yes, the external is a projection of the internal, which only means that you have the ability to perceive it differently, right? So chaos only looks like chaos because you're perceiving it as chaos. Chaos to you may not be chaos to me, and that can go into a multitude of things, right? So if that's the case, then it's not a problem at the level of form, right? And so at the level of form would be like a chaotic environment, but instead it's a perceptual problem. It's your problem at the level of your mind in what you are perceiving. And that's the coolest part. And to me, like, no matter where you are on your journey, this most likely will prickle you or resonate with you, but it will spark remembrance, because you know all these things deep within. And that's why I'm like pretty unwavering in my message, despite where people are at on their journey. And it's not like oh, I'm going to be in your face and I'm better than you. It's like, you're unwavering in your journey, and so am I, because I know spirit speaks to spirit, and it's not at the level of the words. So if I all of a sudden shift and I'm like, yeah, but we can do X, Y, and Z, then it doesn't align the same way, if that makes sense. I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No. I love that, Ashley, but I shouldn't say but, because I absolutely love everything you said, and you're absolutely right. But let's take a scenario, because this one I've been, it's been in my mind for a while now, trying to understand all of this. And, that's a problem right there, right? Trying to understand or trying to make sense of it is the better.
It doesn't make sense.
But let's say, okay, you're a child, you're 10 years old, and you've worked with children in situations like this, so that's why I want to bring it to you. Mm-hmm. And you're in an environment where, your father is an alcoholic, and that creates a lot of chaos in your home. Your mother, is scared. She can't do anything about it. And then, your father occasionally beats you up, or whatever the case might be, right? Whatever alcoholics do. Well, how is that child then able to not perceive that environment as chaotic and as something that they're creating? Because how, could we even argue that the child is creating the environment for it to be in? I mean, I'm sure there's some lessons there that they have to learn, but that's, when I bring it down to scenarios in which it appears that someone doesn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, they always have a choice, but it appears really good that you really don't have a choice. Then what do we do? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So,
from the child's point of view, by the way.
Yeah, so I think ultimately it's easy to try to say that it's different from a child's point of view because we feel like this empathy and this deeper vulnerability when we look at a child when we're all equally the same, and that's going to prickle a lot of people, but we're all parts of spirit projected into this illusion, and the age really doesn't matter except for a child just hasn't learned all the ego things yet, like at the deeper level. And I think there's many scenarios of that, and I worked in child protection for over a decade, you know that, that I witnessed that, and that there was children that it completely did not impact them, that they had this, yeah. So those studies want to paint a certain picture, and I'll be honest, like that's a whole nother conversation we could have of now that like I'm away from child protection and I've really began to unwind the mind, and like I can see it in such a different perspective of like were we actually helpful or harmful, and like what, like was it us pushing our beliefs? It's just like Tom's shoes, for example. I used to love Tom's shoes. If you're not familiar with them, for every pair you purchase, a pair gets given to children in Africa. And I used to love Tom's shoes. And, they're like the people that started the movement of purchasing things to make you feel like you're doing something good, right? So now it's like you buy this, we plant a tree. You do this, we feed a child. Like all these, like when I buy things now, I'm actually giving back. But when I really started to like unwind the mind and started to do my own deep internal healing, I'm like, did some like looking into that. And there's quite a few like articles out there about like the children in Africa didn't need shoes. Their feet had like built calluses and things that allowed them to walk barefoot all of the time. And like, who's the one that all of a sudden decided children in Africa needed shoes? Because it was through their lens, through their view, that this is what needs to happen. So then it became the masses, right? Then everybody believed like, oh my gosh, these children in Africa are suffering and living this painful life because they don't have shoes. So the same goes to when you think of a child who had an alcoholic father who maybe abused them every now and then, when we blanket assume that that child witnessed it as chaos and had massive impact on them, is inaccurate. And that has to do again with their internal state, which has to do with like a whole nother conversation of like the lifetimes they have already spent on this in this illusion or whatever of unwinding of the mind and forgiving and things like that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but like I've witnessed it directly that like there's children, and I don't even know. I mean, thinking in my head, it's probably pretty close to equal of, and I worked with hundreds of children that were placed in foster care, that were adopted, that were, reunified with their parents, severely abused, alcoholics. And when I really take an objective look, Constantine, and remove my emotions and remove like my belief system, I would say it's pretty even as to the children that were impacted versus the children that didn't appear to be impacted.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but if you go talk to someone who's in it, or talk to someone who has a history of abuse that they have not healed yet, or has a certain lens, they're going to give you all the other statistics, right? Like that takes massive to be able to see a child as you, as the adult, right? Like the Shack. I did a video on the Shack, and he kills his father when he's in his teenage years because his father's abusive and he's a part of the church and blah, blah, blah. And then later on down the road when he's at the Shack and he is meeting with, I think her name is Wisdom, she starts to ask him to be the judge of like, oh, does this person deserve to be hurt and this person? And she flashes this small child being abused. And she's like, does he need to be judged? And he goes, no, he's just a child. He's innocent. And she goes, but he already has been judged. And he's like, what? And he's like, that's your father. But just because his father all of a sudden became an adult, he deserved to die, versus when he was a child and being abused. See what I'm saying? Like, it's the perspective.
And I love that you went there, because everything is perspective, right? We started talking about what's our definition of calm and chaos, right? And it was different.
Right. Perspective.
everything is perspective, right? Success, everything, every single piece is perspective. And that's actually really interesting because everything that happens in society now that you look at it, I mean, I've seen this all the time, right? I'm one that likes to challenge the status quo. Everything comes from a perspective of someone else, like why do we drive on the right hand side of the street versus the left in the UK, right? Because someone made up the rules, right? It doesn't mean that that's the correct way to do it.
It just happened.
Yeah, right. Like that's a basic example that comes up to me. And it's I love the example of the shoes as well with Africa, right? And because I guess at the level of the form or the level of the mind, that's a really good thing. Oh, they're giving out from their profits to help someone else, but they're helping them based on what I think you need help with versus what you actually need help with.
Right.
So that's actually interesting as well.
Yeah. Because there's now that these kids wear shoes, sometimes then they don't build the calluses, but they don't always have access to the shoe. It's a whole if you want to go find research on that, that's out there too, right? You just have to Google what you're looking for. That's the key with Google, right? Constantine, you know this. We all know this. You will find exactly what you are searching for on Google.
Yeah, it's your perspective, right? And
yeah, because it exists. It always will exist.
Or both sides of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we bring it back to calm versus chaos, right? How do you see us bringing more calm into our life and seeing chaos for what it is, which is just, like you say, everyone has a different perspective, but clutter of the mind, ego pulling us in to keep us in the illusion, everything else that comes with it. How do you see it in your life?
The calm versus the chaos is.
So what do you still find yourself chaotic at times? Do you still find chaos in your life? And then you're like, oh, okay, how did this come about?
Yeah. Of course, I haven't completely unwound. Otherwise I'd lay my body aside. But yeah, it just feels so different and so uncomfortable now. It's interesting. When I first began this journey, that felt like comfort, right? It felt uncomfortable to be in a state of calm and surrender. It felt like I need to do something. I need to have some sort of chaos because that's what we're so used to. So now I'm really at this place of shift. It's way less of the chaos, way more of the calm surrender. And the chaos has become uncomfortable now. And the calm surrender has become the place I want to be. But I will say at the beginning, it was really uncomfortable. And a lot of my clients, the first moments they begin to experience the massive love that they are is so expansive and so uncomfortable. You want to run into the chaos. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but I would say it's less and it's just this discomfort.
No, I love it.
How about you?
It's a journey. It's a beautiful journey. I definitely see it now that anything that I deem to be chaotic or anything close to it, it's my own creation. It's my own perspective that does that.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to help me see some of that quite a bit over the months, right? I will take the finances again, which is something that we talked about 2 weeks ago, right? Money.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember our conversation when you beautifully called me out on it. They'd be like, were you taking care of in the moment versus projecting something into the future or worrying about something that happened in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I find we create chaos, right? A lot of times in our life, we allow the stories of our past to show up now in the present and then worry us about the future, right? So the anxiety of what may happen or may not happen. And then things become chaotic because without even realizing, sometimes it just snowballs from there, and all of a sudden, boom, you have more chaos in your life.
Mm-hmm.
In that example, what happened, right? I was at some bills. I wasn't happy with how much I spent, and I was like, oh, how am I going to pay this? Even though I really knew how. It wasn't going to be a challenge. We're here 5 months later, no problem. But I allowed the stories of the past to play, right? And create this version of the future that would worry me.
Mm-hmm.
Then it manifested how? It created more chaos because my mind was all over the place. I couldn't meditate. I couldn't fall asleep. So I was browsing Facebook for 3 hours.
Right.
That's more chaos, right? Because in my mind, in my situation, the way it created more chaos is because it brought more things to pile up on top of what I was already feeling. Right? Maybe I would see a video, and I remember this. I saw some videos that pulled at my emotional strings, and some that created even more anxiety. Conspiracy theories, things going on in the world, stuff like that. Right? You can easily go down the rabbit hole. So that's how I see it manifesting in my life, is that when I shift my focus from the present moment, when I shift my focus from, you used the word beautifully earlier, like, that you're so full of love, you're just love. When you shift the focus from, you are enough, you are taken care of, and the shift can happen without you realizing so easily. That's when you invite chaos back into your life. And I feel like chaos, I'm curious to see, this just came out for me actually, chaos feels like the innate state of us human beings. Meaning that the ego wants to keep us in the illusion. So chaos becomes the innate state, and us going away from chaos is going towards spirituality, which is, of course, unraveling the illusion. So it's like, how do we fight against, no, fight is maybe not the right word. How do we go against our physiology, go against our build, go against our humanness, right? Because we can never not be human. Which is, I feel like, what the journey you are on the most represents this, because you've realized what you're working against, and you're able to pull yourself out more and more and more. Yes, you get dragged back in occasionally, but the more awareness you bring to it, the more you can bring yourself out of it. And I'm at a stage as well, somewhere in there. And for me, meditation and other mindfulness practices has helped a lot in allowing me to quiet the mind and see things for what they are.
Yeah. I think the biggest piece is the journey of, like, probably one of the most significant pieces of it is realizing you're not a body, you're not a human, you're dreaming it. So it's like, if I dreamed tonight that I was like a dolphin, right? Many people dream in their dreams that they're animals. Yeah. Like, it's super common. It doesn't mean that that dream, I didn't experience it, right? It doesn't mean that I didn't believe in my dream I was a dolphin, but I wasn't a dolphin. I'm not a dolphin. And like, it's like we're in another layer of that, right? So like, when we dream in this dream, it's a deeper layer than the dream of, I'm dreaming I'm a human right now in a body separated from pieces of me, right? Because there's only one me here. There's only one I, the I. So many different gurus and thought leaders talk about the I am.
Yes.
And yeah, so it's not, and I think that's a big piece. The ego wants us to constantly honor it. It's like, but yes, I know, ego, that like, you helped me from jumping off bridges. Like, that was a big thing. I used to like think that I just became friends with the ego and I didn't untie from the ego. And now it's like, no, the ego is a false belief system I carry. The ego isn't even real except for the belief I have in it. So it's like, it's not about fighting it, which I thought it was at first, because it very much feels like that. It's not about dismissing it. It's not about becoming friends with it. It's just about like realizing it's not even there. Right. So it's, you can't disacknowledge something that doesn't even exist. So it's just like not even playing into the existence of it because it doesn't exist. So it's not even, it's about pulling down the barriers to what your innate state is, which is spirit, which is the I am, which is the I, which is the dreamer of the dream. And everything else is just the, shiny objects placed on the frame of the mirror or the frame of the picture to distract you from the true picture that's here. So I don't know if that fully made sense, but essentially it's you aren't any of that. So it's not about trying to figure out how it fits, but the ego wants you to figure out how it fits because it doesn't want you to ever get rid of it.
Yeah. That's deep. I mean, it gets me thinking of a lot of things and a lot of things to come up.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the thing too, like you said earlier, like you and I are able to have these beautiful conversations because we've built a respectful, loving relationship. So earlier when I said like my message is unwavering, it doesn't mean that like I don't meet people where they're at. And like if they're big into manifesting, manifesting isn't the final answer, but manifesting can help you understand how powerful the brain is. So it's like I always ensure that I'm not representing something that I don't believe is true anymore in order to help someone else feel better. Because the only reason why I'm doing that is because I believe they're separate from me. So what I'm really doing in that moment, Constantine, is I'm stroking my own ego. I'm allowing the ego to be very much alive in my belief system because I'm seeing that person as separate from me, and they're not.
So let me ask you this. This came up then. So if you see the other person as not separate from you as you, then what you're saying is that you want to always share essentially what you would do in the situation because it's you anyway. That's what you're talking about, as opposed to playing nice to make them feel good.
Yeah, and it's always from a place of love. So like someone who's watching this that very much lives in the ego would be like, oh yeah, when I tell someone they're an asshole and all that, like this is giving them, righteousness to do that because nobody exists. But the problem is they're living in the ego. So this is when you're truly living from a place of love. Your actions are loving and you're showing up from love. So you still meet like that person with love. I never tell someone what you're thinking is wrong. I share my perspective and allow you to be, moved by it, whatever that is. Maybe it aligns with you, maybe it doesn't. Like my way of really unwinding is A Course in Miracles. Is there thousands of other ways? Yes. Do people make it there through church? Yes. Did people make it through Buddhism? Yes. In all these different ways. But the second I shift for someone outside of myself means I've thrown it all out the window. That's people pleasing. That's seeing people as separate. And that is like the number one thing we all agree on, right? We all agree we're one. Like anybody who's in spirituality will say we are one, period. Like that is like one of the grandest agreements. But then in the next aspect, they talk about their brother outside of them and that this person did this to them. So it completely immediately conflicts their core belief that is truth.
I love it, Ashley.
Yeah, we've gone way over, Constantine. You had a hard stop.
Oh, no, it's okay. We're good. We're 42 minutes in. I have another 10 minutes or so, but I'm loving this conversation because obviously it's opening up my viewpoints even further. And I mean, I can't find anything to argue with you on that. And not that I want to, but it's beautiful. So let me ask you this, because in your practice, and we both have a practice, we teach different things, we help people with different things, but yet in the end, it's pretty much the same thing.
It's always the same.
Okay, actually, no, let me ask a different question, because I know you gave this example a couple of times. You said earlier in your relationship with Patrick, when you were, let's quote unquote, losing your shit or like, having a meltdown, mm-hmm. He was coming from a place of love as opposed to a place of fear or judgment. Mm-hmm. Help me understand it a bit better. Like, for example, let's say, things are getting worked out between me and my partner. Right? We're having a conversation, we're having an argument. And in that moment, you know that the other person is wrong, or you feel the other person is wrong. Let's put it this way. You think they're wrong. How can you come from a place of love? Or how do you come from a place of love? Let's say your client does that, because I'm assuming your relationship with Patrick is different now, but let's say a client or someone on the street or someone on the market or a friend or a family member, they're dead wrong. You're going to give your perspective, but you want to come from a place of love so it doesn't appear judgmental. It doesn't appear like you're bossy or you know better or any of that stuff. How do you do that today?
Well, the first
imagine
problem...
it brings the calm, right? So sorry to cut you off there. I would imagine, because if you can come from that place, that's how you bring calm in versus chaos. Because if you come from a place of fear or judgment or ego, that's where the chaos gets fulfilled.
Yeah. So I would say to you, you've already are coming from a place of chaos, and you can't find your way back to calm until you realize that you've immediately decided that they're wrong. So to decide someone is wrong is in the ego belief system, because only right and wrong exists from a state of fear, right? Because you're fearful, there has to be a left or right or up or down. So you can't meet them with love, and it wouldn't be true love. It would be ego love. It would be one of like the 5 love languages, or it would be love in order to receive, right? And we learn that when it's a give and take, you're in the ego belief system. So technically there is no wrong and there is no right. That's your I know mind, right? And this goes back into our conversation about perspective, that you believe it is so blatantly wrong for them to drive on the left side of the street in the US, that we drive on the right side. But truly, if we break that completely down, it's neither, because that was a decision, a perspective made by someone in one point. Is there outcomes? Is there, consequences, right? I don't even want to say that word, but is there outcomes that may not be favorable to that person? Yes. But does that mean they are wrong? No, because there's outcomes to everything. You see what I'm saying? So your first issue is you have to bring it back to the mind and realize it has nothing to do with their actions and them doing something wrong, but a belief that you are holding on to, that you are attempting to project out onto them. And only can you meet them with love when you bring it back to the mind where it actually is, and you release the belief and realize like they're just an expression in this moment, and you can love them and you can see them and you can honor them for their expression in this moment. But the second you labeled it wrong, you done fucked up. You done went down the rabbit, but you can always take it back. That's the beautiful thing as well, is like, we're not talking about flow state or, the flow state that they teach you where we have to have optimal conditions. But the coolest thing is, like, in any given second, you can choose different. Like, how cool is that, Constantine? Like, you can choose to do something, and in any given second, choose to do something different. Wow.
I love that. And you're absolutely right, because the more I look at this myself, it's like the people, when they take actions, it doesn't matter what actions they take. Most of them know or feeling for them is the right action to take. Just because it appears wrong to me doesn't mean it is. Right? This is what you're saying, right? Because once you place the judgment, it's right or wrong or in between, indifferent, whatever,
But wait,
too far gone.
So when you said like the person feels the right action, I would find that like that's probably been the most interesting thing I've been learning when you lean into spirit. Because remember I said earlier, when you're sitting in the calm of spirit and allowing full guidance by spirit, some of the things that come up like make no sense. You're like, this what? My mind, my ego mind that judges, right? Because you're judging. Even if you think your decision is right, you've made a judgment. So you made that decision from the ego. So what spirit has shown me is that right doesn't really exist. That's, again, stories I'm operating from within. And so when I lean in and do something that my old narratives would say doesn't feel right per se, is when like my mind is blown and I'm like, whoa, what is right? Right isn't even anything. And it's like, these are the things you and I've talked about, is like a lot of this stuff, it's not about intellectualizing, because that will get you nowhere. You can intellectualize anything. It's about experiencing. It's about integrating. And I know you and I've had some really cool moments where we have a conversation and, afterwards one of us or both of us experiences it and we're like, oh my gosh, like this is what we were talking about. And look it. And it happens a lot with Patreon. So I don't know why I brought that in, other than like, if someone's listening in and they're like, but I know these things, but it doesn't happen. Well, it's because you can know a lot of shit. But the biggest piece is to realize you really don't know any of it. And it's about like the experiential and the just leaning in and allowing the guidance to come through.
Yes. Love it, Ashley. Wow.
Sorry, I had to bring that in though, because even us deciding our mind, we've made the right decision. What the fuck is right?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about perspective again, right? Like we talked about it a few times today, because your perspective of right and wrong is very, very different than mine, and very different than every other person in the world, right? and it's really interesting. And we can go down this rabbit hole a lot more, but that's actually a great point for us to maybe wrap it up here, Ashley. And I know next week we're not going to be live on YouTube, but live in the Patreon group that you host. So maybe tell people a bit about that and how they can join.
Yeah, so the first Sunday of every month, we do a private live, Constantine and I and a group of other beautiful projections of spirit. We just go deep, and it's such a I don't know, I feel like every time we have it, it's just like this new level of awareness for everyone there, right? It's not a guru-led anything. It's truly a discussion like Constantine and I have. New concepts are brought, but that, if you want to join us in that, you go to the Big Miracle Energy Patreon, sign up for the Right-Minded Thinker, and you will get access to the private Zoom link. And then you will also have the ability to come live with us on YouTube on the third Sunday of every month here. So if you're curious, you can check out past ones. They're on here, the Be Me Live Patreon calls. But yeah, I don't know. I love that.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, no, I mean, since I joined that, those calls definitely opened up a lot for me as well, to at least challenge my own beliefs, right? Because at the end of the day, you are the decider. When I mean you, anyone listening, you decide what's right and wrong and indifferent for you. Like, you have your own definitions, but at least you can get to challenge some of them and see, hey, is that really how it works? And that's what our conversations have done for me. Ashley, you've allowed me to, provide a space where I can challenge my own beliefs and say, I haven't considered that, or I haven't thought of it that way, or I haven't seen it that way yet. And this is what these conversations do as well, right? We have different perspectives, and anyone listening, they have their own perspectives, and they can take whatever they want and toss out what doesn't make sense right now. It's not about right or wrong, right? Like you said, beautiful. And yeah, for example, yesterday on the podcast, Anisha, I saw, for those listening, we released an episode on meditation with someone that's a close friend of mine, and he's been meditating for like 40 plus years. So if you want to bring more calm into your life, that might be something to give a listen to. But otherwise, yeah, come join us next Sunday with Ashley's Big Miracle Energy, and then we'll see you there. And thank you, Ashley, again. This was beautiful.
Thank you.